You're recording too frequently? Oh, okay. Hello and welcome to the Scoreboard Podcast. I'm your host, Rivka Boord of Jets X Factor, the home of the best New York Jets content on the internet. Today we're joined by a special guest, the founder and co-owner of Jets X Factor, Robby Sabo. Robby, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, of course, Rivka. How are the Sunday shows doing?
They're good. They're usually fun. We haven't done one at this time of day yet. Usually they were evenings, so we'll see how it goes. But
You will see who's. I mean, the Mets are on right now. Yanks are on right now. Let's send a. You know what I'll do? I'll send a notification through the app to try to see if Jets and Mets fans will hop on this stream real quick.
sounds good. Yeah, I mean, I'm a Met fan myself, but also a very pessimistic one. So I kind of lay low early in the season and
Oh,
kind of
you know what? I
scout
keep
the
seeing
landscape.
people. I keep seeing people saying break up the Mets. I'm optimistic about this team. Their pitching has been great so far, and everyone thought the
It's
pitching would
true.
suck.
It's true, but then you have the hitters who just somehow manage to always not hit when you want them to.
For sure, and the fear is, okay, the hitting will eventually hit because they have a decent lineup, and then the pitching will come back down to earth. But I mean, if the hitting, which should be good, is the ill right now, I'm still optimistic because if they could pitch like this and maintain it at least somewhat, they should have a chance. They should do something.
Look, I hear it. My years as a young kid where the Mets were competitive until June and then they fell off a cliff. So that's kind of what I always expect.
Do you
But
remember what's the first team you remember?
2004, I just remember Reyes was young. David Wright, I was actually at his first career game. I think Ty Wigginton was on that team. That was
Yeah,
my
Kaz
yeah,
Matsui.
Matsui. Yep, that was his first year.
Okay,
Um,
so you remember 2006, the Andy
I
Chavez
do.
catch.
I
I
do.
mean,
I do. I was devastated.
that is brutal. That was brutal. And listen, I grew up a Yankees fan, so my first memories were the early '90s Yankees, and they were. I kind of remember it right when it got started to turn around in '93. But
Mhm.
I'm a Yankees fan who was spoiled, and I hate other Yankees fans. They just became so obnoxious to me, and I hated the Steinbrenner, Giambi, and everything they did after the dynasty just drove me off a cliff.
I hear that. I definitely hear that. I'm see someone mentioned the Rangers. I believe you're also a Ranger fan, so maybe this will be the year. Maybe.
You know what, Panarin? If Panarin keeps shooting the way he's done all year, I'll feel a lot better. But he that's only one of the battles. The other battle is how physical playoffs are, and
And that's always their
I
problem.
I question Panarin in the playoffs still. Like, I hope he does it, but I'm gonna question it until I see it.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear that one. Okay, but now let's get to the subject of the show, the Jets, and we'll get right into it. So I titled this, "Are the Jets Getting a Bad Rap?" And the reason I titled it that way is just because you see across the country, across the national media, no one believes in the Jets. Now, to a certain extent, we're used to that, but I also thought there might be a little bit more optimism after the moves the Jets made. Why do you think people just seem to disbelieve what the Jets have done this offseason?
I mean, it's one and the same in terms of Jet history. I mean, listen, you got at some point you just got to do it. You got to get it done, and they haven't gotten it done in so long. So the title is it fair? I think you had the title, and it's kind of a cop out answer, but yes and no. On one side of the token, it's not fair when looking at this roster objectively. Like, they have talent, they have legit talent, and yeah, Douglas struck out on Zach Wilson, he struck out on Becton, but if you look at his drafts and compare it with some of the best GMs in history, even the bust rate is pretty damn close. Like, he's been phenomenal in terms of comparing it apples to apples. But then again, they haven't done it in so long. So I expect it. I expect this pessimism, and not only that, I think fans are welcoming it. Like, it's a nice change compared to last year. And for the superstitious fan, they are really loving it because they can remember great seasons of Jets past, and the seasons that have turned out to be the best were the ones where the most pessimism carried over into the start of the season. So I think Jets fans are loving it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would agree with that one. I mean, just even from my childhood, I think like 2006, no one expected them to do anything.
Yeah.
Even 09, 10, 10 a little bit more, but 09 for sure, no one expected them to do anything. And so, yeah, to a certain extent, that is true. It rankles a little bit because you looked at this team ending the last season and you said, okay, what do they need? They need offensive line and they need a receiver. And what did they do? They got the offensive line and they got the receiver. So not completely, but they're in pretty good shape entering the draft. So you would think that then people would say, okay, they answered they answered all their needs. But instead it's like, well, you got this injury guy and you got that injury guy.
Yeah.
You think that people would be questioning Mike Williams' injury so much if he had signed with the Bills?
Not to this extent, but that's just the nature of the beast. Media is about, especially in today's social media day and age, it's about engagement, and it's about trying to push the fan emotion to the most extreme level, whether it's hope or despair. So, with Mike Williams, they're going to go despair. Once the draft comes around, it's going to be hope. It's going to be the full height of hope. Like there's some hope mixed in right now with what they did in free agency. But with football, it doesn't really matter. Sometimes it doesn't matter much what's on paper in terms of the depth chart. Got to stay healthy. That's one. So who cares if they're starting 5 up front looks good? Got to stay healthy. Number one, and number two, do they have the coaching? Coaching in football matters more than any other sport. So I think that's the reason in which they're how people feel about the team right now is sort of fair in my eyes.
Okay, I hear that. Now, how concerned are you about Rodgers coming off the Achilles? Injury wise, in terms of him being healthy and productive.
Not too concerned. Yeah, I forgot what show I was on, and someone was asking, a fan was asking, talking about his mobility and running with the ball, and I'm not really concerned about that. Like, the gap man principle stuff, they're going to mix in more with Tyron Smith and Simpson and Moses. It's going to open up play action because you could do so much more elaborate play action stuff with man stuff like waggles and even better boots where you're pulling a guy, where you try to make it look like a power instead of always doing an outside zone stretch boot or something of that sort.
Mm-hmm.
So the mobility stuff in terms of structure, I'm not too worried about it. In terms of being injured, that's the thing I worry about a little more. If you tell me they get through August healthy and Tyron Smith is still healthy, I'm not worried about it nearly as much.
So do you think they're going to play Rodgers in the Snoopy Bowl again this season?
Yes, I do actually.
Me too. I think they definitely will. And everyone will be holding their breath.
I do, because it's gonna be up to Rodgers, and he's gonna say yes based on how much time he missed. And the other thing too, Rivka, I've been at camp, 90% of the days since Sal has been here, and I think I want to see them go a little harder. Like, I'll take an injury or two, a devastating injury or two, if that means you go harder in camp, because that sets up the rest of the season so much better. It's been so light. And okay, last year they escaped summer without any devastating injuries, which again, on
Except Chuck
paper,
Clark.
yeah, on paper looked good. Okay, Rodgers gets hurt in the first game. That was just a fluke on a three-step cut block where, his juices are flowing. He's trying to make a play. He should have just grounded it. But look at the way they have collapsed the last 2 years. Gotten off to decent starts both years, 4-3 this past year, and what was it, 6-3, 7-4 the year prior, and then collapsed. There's something to be said for going not as hard as you can, but a little harder, and not worrying about injuries so much in the summer. And that's going to be my first takeaway when camp starts in July.
It's reminiscent of Miracle with Herb Brooks, right? It's the team that outlasts the other team, not necessarily is more talented, but is conditioned the best to go a full season.
It matters a lot. And listen, there are limitations in today's game. The NFLPA, the NFL sold its soul for that 17th game, giving up a lot in terms of practice and everything in that sort. So there are limitations, but I think the Jets could squeeze more out and not worry about injuries as much. And Hey, injuries happen. I mean, if you worry about it to such a degree where you're going so light and it's noticeable, that's even worse.
I definitely hear that one. By the same token, how concerned are you about AVT? I know you're the like AVT champion fan of like this is the
Oh,
heart and soul of the Jets offense. And
it,
that Achilles tear, what do you think it's going to do to him?
I'm not too worried about the Achilles, to be honest, specifically. I'm more worried about his availability as a whole. Yeah, he got injured playing tackle both times. I mean, could it have be a factor? Yes, because when you're playing one position, you're so mechanical. You're not used to using certain muscles. I don't put a lot of stock into it, but it could have had an effect. Not worried about the Achilles, worried about the availability. Even though he played in college, he played as a rookie for the Jets, and him being the heart and soul. I mean, you look at the O line splits. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. It's been so long, but
They're outrageous. The
yeah,
numbers, like the differences.
yeah, they're crazy. They're insane, and it's not even. Yeah, he's a talent up front, but it's more about leadership. And even when Rodgers went out, they still had AVT as the leader of the offense. No one else. I mean, they don't have many leaders, especially on offense. So, when you lose both guys, Rodgers and AVT, forget about it. And that's pretty much what happened. And I think that's what happens the past 2 years.
Okay, so now let's. I guess I wanted to transition towards the draft a bit, but that's a little bit weird. They have to get insurance for some of these injuries.
Yeah.
They signed Tyrod Taylor. I think that he's going by Tyrod, not Tyrod now. But they signed him to back up Rodgers, and he showed last year that even in a very bad situation, he can carry a team. He's not, look, if Rodgers goes down for the season, that's the end of that. But that's the case for most teams, if not every team in the NFL. But if he goes down for a few games, now they have someone who can hold the fort and bring it back. But let's say the injuries, let's say we're talking about offensive line, we're talking about receiver. Let's get to the draft a little bit. Would you agree with the assessment that taking a tackle in the first round is the most important thing simply because of the likelihood that Tyron Smith is going to miss time?
I think when you're basing it just on position, I think tackles by far number one. But when you factor in the big board, it's different. So, in other words, yes, tackle is by far number one on the position power rankings. However, depending on how the draft falls, I'm not committing to tackle all the way. That's where I'm at right now.
So even though let's say they can get a Bakhtiari or they can get some other veteran tackle, a Cam Fleming,
Mhm.
someone who can hold the fort. They don't have any tackles under contract for 2025. Would that factor into your consideration of taking a tackle?
Yes, but it wouldn't be high priority. In other words, what the board looks like means a lot more to me. So I'm looking
Okay.
at 2024 mainly, and 2025 factors in. But if they get Bakhtiari, and I still think they will, for all we know, it might be done already. Like they're just waiting for the perfect time. I don't know anything. That's just a flat out guess, but I think they're going to land him, which is going to be huge. It's still based on what they've gone through. It's still not enough, and I think you'd agree with me on that. But
Absolutely.
the question is, I mean, and listen, me and you probably differ on this a little bit. Last year with the O line, I'm not nearly as hard on Douglas as you are, because he did like his process when he first came in. He drafted Becton, he drafted AVT. He did something with those two first rounders that the Jets hadn't done since 2006, which is neglect beyond anything we've ever seen in football. Draft a first round offensive lineman. It was insane what Rex and Idzik did, what Rex and Mikey T did. Mikey T and Mangini were the last true personnel combo they had. Um, they got hurt. I mean, yes, could he have done more? Sure, but I think he tried. Like he tried to get Tooney. He's tried and he swung and not gotten him. The Tyron Smith thing, my God, they were shocked, just like everyone else is shocked how he accepted that deal. I mean, the same things that make you rave about the deal, 1 year incentive laden, the same things that scratch your head. Like he couldn't get a multi-year deal anywhere else. This Hall of Fame talent, how's that possible? Um, so I want another tackle, no question about it. But It depends how the draft falls. I mean, what are they going to do? Will they actually go Bowers at 10 if a trade down scenario is there and they could get a Latham in the mid round? That's the question at the moment, I think.
So you think, I mean, I was looking at your big board, and that's one of the things I wanted to reference. You have Bowers, I think, number 4, right? You had him right ahead of Latham. You
Yes.
think that's what you're predicting JD's big board is, not necessarily what yours would be,
Correct.
or both?
Correct. No. What JD's. But the thing is, that thing that's not taken into account is, and maybe I should have done this, but I think it's neck and neck between Bowers and trade down for an offensive tackle, if that makes sense. So he may lean towards, if Bowers is there and Latham and Fashanu, and they both of them are both there, and they could trade down 5 spots, get a second rounder, that might still be ahead of Bowers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're saying that all things being equal, they may choose to get one of the players that's maybe a little lower on their board, but still very much there, rather than just taking Bowers at 10, and that may supersede.
Yes. So, I probably should do a situation big board as opposed to just a player big board, because a situation big board, I think I'd have the trade down for the tackle at 4 with Bowers being after that. But it's very close at this point because I could also see them taking Bowers based on Rodgers. And we all know the issues there, the inline stuff. It's so hard for tight ends and offensive linemen to get up to speed, their rookie year compared to decades ago when it was easy, because the game has changed and it's easier for receivers these days. So that's the issue with Bowers. If they do take him, I think you got to view him as a receiver first and foremost in his rookie year.
So the question is, if Bowers as a receiver is really better than a guy you can get in the 3rd round, because as dominant as he is with Yak, and we're not going to question that at all. Michael wrote an article a few days ago showing that something like, I don't know, it was a ridiculous percentage. I should have looked it up before, but a ridiculous percentage of his yardage of his completions came behind the line of scrimmage. I would say something like 80 to 90% of his big plays in college came on either screens or flat route where he was wide open. Not like, oh, he made someone miss and that's why he was wide open. No, the scheme and the way the play was run was wide open. It is very hard for me to believe that he's going to get that kind of free release in the NFL. And I don't know, do you have the confidence to say that, if teams start keying on him, that or at least putting more talented athletic guys on him, that he'll be able to succeed the way he did in college?
Not the utmost confidence, no. I don't know if he's generational. I don't think I view him as generational. So I would shy away from him personally at 10. But when looking at talents specifically on that big board, I just can't put Latham ahead of him. Like, that's the problem I have. I can't put Latham ahead of him. I can't put Odunze ahead of him. Just Harrison, Alt, and Neighbors. So it's not more so I believe he's generational and I'm clamoring for him at 10. I'm not. It's just the way everything's falling right now. And the other thing with JD, I mean, what do we know about him? He's a value-driven guy, first and foremost. So the fact that he landed Tyron Smith is a miracle in my mind, number one. And number two, he knows what's deep in the draft every year. It's receiver and tight end. And last year, there were a bunch of tight ends up at the top of the draft, not Bowers-like, but, Laporta, Kincaid, Mayer, and they all dropped. So, I suspect Bowers is going to drop a little bit too in this draft. And don't rule out a trade down for Bowers at the same time.
Well, I mean, I could see Bowers dropping only if the Jets don't take him. Meaning, if after 10, if he doesn't go 10 to the Jets, he's going to fall. He'll probably fall straight to the 20s. That's what I think.
Probably. And in that case, I mean, I think Jets fans would sign up for a trade down, get a second, if possible, take Bowers in the 20s. You could do work with those mid-round picks with a tackle and a receiver. I mean, you're looking pretty solid there.
I mean, that's why I think I ruffled a lot of feathers when I first wrote that the Jets should not take Bowers. And I think my point was not that Bowers is a terrible player or that he can't develop into a talented player. I just think at number 10, he's not the value pick. He hasn't shown enough in college for me to say that he's going to be a year 1 contributor. And again, I would rather, if given all things, I would rather take a tackle at that spot. I would also rather take a receiver. I mean, I have my preferences with receivers. Odunze is not necessarily my preference, but I think between Odunze and Bowers, I'm still going Odunze. I still see more year one potential in Odunze than I do in Bowers.
That's a tough one for me. I think position-wise, I agree. Talent-wise, it's close. I'm not even gonna pick, to be honest. I'm not crazy high on Odunze. How do you have the receivers ranked?
Oh, so I have Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze, and it's like Harrison clear number one, Neighbors clear number two, and Odunze a significant amount down at number three.
Yeah, that's kinda how I have it. I have Neighbors, I think probably a little closer to Harrison, and then huge gap between Neighbors and everyone else. And I think I might have Thomas closer to Odunze than other people. Um, but again, I mean, to draft one of these receivers, you're drafting size, basically. It's so deep. It's so deep, and there will be a guy or two to fall to them in the 3rd round. Um, that's
Well, for
it. I'm not
sure, but I think Odunze's contested catch ability is not something you see walking on the street, and that in and of itself, even if he gets pressed a lot at the NFL level, which could very well happen, just his ability to catch a ball one on one could make him at least a decent player year one.
Yeah, definitely. I just keep going back, and it's stuck in my head because I really was all over this 2 years ago. Garrett versus London, and Garrett. There were a lot of people who favored London, but I just didn't love it because London, even though he was more the possession guy, the contested catch guy. Garrett Wilson, there were questions about route running with Garrett Wilson, but what I kept seeing was him setting up guys one on one in route running, and that just blew me away compared to London. And I'm so glad. London went before Garrett Wilson, didn't he, in that draft?
I think he went 9 actually. No, 8. Ross went 9. You're right. He went 8, and then Garrett went 10.
I'm so glad the Falcons took London over Garrett. Well, I was doing handsprings in my living room at that time. So Odunze, hey, maybe I'm not. Listen, would I take Odunze on the Jets? Of course. I'm nitpicking here.
Have you watched a lot of any Mike Williams film?
No, not this offseason. But I'm familiar with him enough. Like
Because I think I mean, when you watch him, just the way he never creates any separation, and
correct.
he's everything is contested catches. So you just wonder if Odunze could become that same player even in year one. Then again, Williams was a top 10 pick, and it took him 3 years to really, establish himself. So could that happen with Odunze too?
See, the great thing about Mike Williams, Odunze, even Bowers is, and this will benefit Bowers greatly, is Rodgers. The more possession a guy is, the bigger, the more red zone threat a guy is, the less he could separate, the better he's going to be with a guy like Rodgers, because Rodgers takes advantages of those larger frames to place the ball exactly where he wants it. So I don't think they have any interest in Mike Williams if Rodgers is not their quarterback. It's that simple. And same thing with Bowers. So Odunze could fall in the same category.
So the thing about Bowers is that he doesn't use that big body so well, meaning he doesn't, he didn't show a knack for contested catches in college. He kind of misjudged the ball in the air a lot, didn't necessarily put himself in the best position to catch the ball. So does that really even apply as much to him?
Yeah, I think in college, it's tough to get those examples. It's so wide open that it's tough to see it translate because you don't see it as much in college. But his raw physical attributes allows for that growth potential. So I think talent evaluators are thinking of him as someone who will grow into that at the next level. That's the question. Can you think he gets to that point?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one thing I would say about contested catches is not all contested catches are created equal. Not all contested catch situations are created equal. For example, you watch Garrett Wilson last year. There were definitely contested catches that he didn't come up with that you would have wanted him to come up with. But by the same token, there were many of them that the quarterback threw it up to him in a really bad spot. And you don't really expect a guy who's like barely he skimmed 6 feet, maybe he's five somewhere between 5'11", 6 feet, and 190 something pounds. I mean, I wouldn't really expect a receiver like that to catch a ball. Yes, will the elite of the elite in the NFL catch that ball? Potentially. But again, if it's placed in a horrible spot, it's not the same thing as a back shoulder throw where the cornerback is on you, but you have a chance to to kind of muscle them out versus a bull where you were expecting it back shoulder and it comes inside and then you're trying to out muscle them. And a lot of Garrett's contested catch situations were those, where it was supposed to be back shoulder and it came inside and then he has to muscle out when he wasn't positioned for that.
Yeah. Garrett Wilson, the ideal scenario is him in the slot. It's that simple. So the best argument for Odunze is that, you have Odunze and Mike Williams on the outside with Garrett Wilson in the slot. And, you remember the Browns game when Flacco worked his magic. It was Garrett Wilson operating out of the slot, making that magic happen. And fans are asking, where's Elijah Moore? It was a big, so when the Jets are doing well, the big stories are ridiculous. Like that, the big story at the beginning of 2022 was how come LaFleur's an idiot? How come he doesn't have EM in the slot and Garrett Wilson on the outside? And I kept telling everyone, Garrett Wilson is the superior slot guy. Like it makes sense the way they have it. So, going with a Neighbors, that kind of fouls things up. Will it work? Yeah, because Neighbors is explosive. So is Garrett Wilson. He's, big enough to work on the outside and they could interchange a lot of pieces, but Odunze does fit pretty perfectly.
So interesting. You think last year before Corey Davis retired, the Jets' plan was to keep Lazard and Davis outside and Garrett in the slot?
Yes.
Because I thought that they brought Lazard in to be more of a big slot. So
listen, they're going to interchange no matter what, but I think they view and they want to put Garrett in the slot first and foremost. Yes.
Yeah. So then that would lean more towards Odunze. But that's one of the problems also with the receivers in the third round is that many of them, once you get out of the first round, do lean more towards slot receivers.
Correct. Because, you're really paying for it. There's so many good receivers you in the early rounds, other than like a Harrison or Neighbors or, like a Garrett Wilson, the special guys. You're really paying for height. You're paying for size in the first round with receivers. So, listen, they can make it work no matter what. But I think that is the preferred situation. Garrett in the slot. He's just a natural slot guy. He's so fluid. He's so smart in terms of reading coverages, and him and Rodgers are on the same page. When Rodgers has a guy, especially a slot guy, who reads the defense very well in the same way he does, they can make plays that are just bananas. So that is the perfect scenario. You're not feeling great. Like I was more mad at the receiver depth compared to the O-line depth last year, going into last season. Even though I wasn't screaming from the rooftops, I was worried about receiver. And if they don't come away with a receiver in this draft, it's going to look pretty awful again to me.
Well, that's one thing. I just wrote an article recently about, the Jets and Douglas's, approach to last year's draft. Once Broderick Jones was off the board, I was screaming for JSN because I was like, they need another receiver. And then when he didn't take JSN, not only did he not take JSN, but he took a developmental edge rusher. And then he doubled down on it by not taking a receiver at all. Like, okay, fine. I understand that they wanted Tippmann in the second round, but there's still, in any draft, I looked it up. There were seven receivers in last year's draft who had at least 700 yards receiving. That's the most in a year, at least. I was just looking back on PFF, at least 2007. The most rookies to have at least 700 receiving yards. I'm not saying that the Jets would have taken the right one. They could have ended up with the guy from Carolina, Mingo. But
yeah,
there were enough guys out there, and not all of them were drafted in the first round, that they could have taken a receiver. There were other guys. The Mario Douglas for New England had a sneaky nice year. Dontavion Wicks for Green Bay. Some of these other guys. There were so many receivers available, and the Jets didn't take any of them. Mm-hmm. And that was a big knock on Douglas.
So JSN, I think the big thing there is what I was just talking about.
The slot.
He is Garrett Wilson. Like they're nearly the same player. How tall is JSN? A little taller, maybe?
I think he might be. Let me see if Jackson Smith and Jake
6 foot. I think he's the same height as Garrett. Right. Like they really are similar players. So
6 foot, and let's see his weight. 6 foot 196. Yeah, very very similar.
Very small. They had just traded away Elijah Moore. I think their plan was not to come away empty-handed. They definitely had someone targeted. Maybe it was Mingo. Mingo hasn't done much. Obviously, it was a terrible offense, though. Receiver is really dependent on the offense. So we'll see. I mean, I get the gripe. McDonald's came out of nowhere. Like, it shocked me. I was hopping on.
And you were asking us about edge rushers right before the pick, and yet I think you were still shocked because of just the type of edge rusher that they took. Not even in terms of his bend, but the fact that he was developmental.
Yeah, he's a sub guy. He's still a sub guy. He's still a passing down, get in there, go get him type guy. And, let's dispel this rumor. Just because they got Reddick does not mean McDonald's a bust. He is a specialty player, which is very important, but you got to have leads. Like, for McDonald to work, you have to have leads in games. If you're losing the whole game, he's nothing. He's meaningless. So I can't look at him this year and judge him in any kind of way. That's the tough part.
But he was a first-round pick, and you can't. How do you spend a first-round pick on a specialty player, especially in a season that's supposed to be all in?
What, last year?
Yeah.
Because if you have leads and you have Aaron Rodgers, then that guy could
get
but
Huff was going to be that guy.
No. Yeah, well, they have two. They had two. I mean, how they.
But they didn't. But they didn't. They used Huff. 40% of the snaps. They didn't use McDonald like 19%, and not necessarily only when they had leads. And at least half his snaps were run defense snaps.
For who?
For McDonald, not half, but close to it.
You can't listen when you're losing. The percentage is so far skewed. Like, teams are going to run on you. So even in pass situations, when you get your sub guys out there, the run's going to come at you. So I don't look at that, but I get your point. It's just tough for me to evaluate him based on the plan was to have him as a sub rusher, and it's just his rookie year too. He's not a big guy. The plan is to have him as a pass rusher on an all-in team. Once Rodgers goes down and you're never winning games, you can't evaluate that guy. It's like trying to evaluate Mariano Rivera on a crappy team where you never have save opportunities. It's really tough to do.
No, I understand that, but now we're going into the second consecutive season where the Jets are hoping to be all in, and what they're going to get, even if they do have leads, they're going to get maximum 30% of the snaps from McDonald.
That's today's league. Like, which team
from a first-round pick? From a first-round pick, though?
Plenty.
Which team uses their first-round pick like that? I mean, and he was a second-rounder, Boye Mafe. I think he might have been. I was looking at the first-rounders from 2022. I was comparing JJ, and I think Mafe played more like a sub role, but he was the only one. The rest of them are all taking starter level snaps, like JJ did last year.
I don't have anyone off the top of my head, but if I go through it, there's definitely the plans don't work out perfectly. And so let me ask you this: are you out on McDonald? Is it a bust?
Oh, the word bust to me means very different than bad pick. I don't think McDonald's a bust. I think McDonald could still be a very good player. I just think it was a stupid pick.
So I'll give you this. The one guy I would have taken instead of McDonald, Quentin Johnson. And I know he didn't do much.
Because he played outside?
Because he has that frame that you're looking for. And I know they still had Corey Davis. And I know he didn't do much. And Chargers are saying the same thing about this guy as we're saying about McDonald. And because he not only did he not produce, he couldn't even beat out guys that he's supposed to beat out. So, sometimes you just got to wait and see. I didn't agree with the McDonald's pick, but I'll just say this. I'm not going to go crazy until I see at least another year in which the team is competitive. That's all I'll say.
Fair enough. I mean, again, I like McDonald as a player. I still think he could be a very good pass rusher. I could see why they took him. I remember seeing people say the Jets might just take the bendiest edge rusher out there, and he was pretty much that. So I can definitely see why they took him. And I guess you are right when you talk about it. The reason they probably didn't take a receiver is the only receiver with the prototype they wanted was Johnston, but they looked at his college film, and they said, we don't like this guy. So then you had JSN, you had Flowers, you had Addison, all, tiny guys, slot guys. And they said, you know what, these are not the type of guys we're looking for. Most of the receivers who did well in last year's draft were slot receivers. And so that's why they chose not to take them.
And they're looking for an impact guy right away. So if they scouted Johnston and they said to themselves, okay, he's a project. He's a bit of a project. If it takes him a year, they were right because he really didn't do much.
I mean, I would have said that they were right. Meaning, if you told me the choice between McDonald or Johnston last year, I would have said McDonald because I just didn't like Johnston. I just didn't like him as a prospect. I thought that, Flowers or JSN were going to be better players. So if you're telling me that that was the reason that they didn't take a receiver, I can understand.
I don't know. And the beauty about it is no one knows because.
But it makes sense. It makes sense, more sense, because I was looking at it as you have Garrett Wilson on the outside.
He's a slot.
You just traded Elijah Moore as a slot guy. You need another slot.
No, see, the entire reason Elijah Moore didn't work is because Garrett was the slot, and with Zach Wilson throwing 7 times a game, there's not enough balls to go around.
But look, Elijah Moore was the number 2 receiver in Cleveland and didn't exactly light the world on fire. So I'm not, even with regardless of who the quarterback was, Elijah Moore was who he was.
Yeah, I don't care if he puts up Jerry Rice numbers. He's getting rid of him is the best thing. Same thing with Jamal Adams. All pro safety. You got it. If you keep those guys around, you're insulting yourself to such a degree that just doesn't allow for improvement and growth. So it's tough. We'll see. Is Jamal signed yet? Is he still a free agent?
I think he's a free agent still. A lot of those former Jets are free agents. Dalvin Cook is still a free agent. I don't know if you saw, I posted it in the Slack. He says he still believes in himself. I think there are a couple of other ones that I saw. Mekhi is still a free agent. It's a certain type, combining poor play with a big mouth that generally doesn't work out well.
Yeah, no, it's always best to stay humble and get it done on the field first, honestly. You're never doing yourself a favor by opening up and feeling and signaling to the world that you're a victim. It's just never the right way.
Yeah. Okay, before we get to the chat, I just had at least a few things. I had another question for you, just about the tackles. Let's say the Jets do go tackle. So you had Alt as your clear number 1. I think Latham was your number 2. I don't remember, you had Fashanu your 3? Let me check it here. You have it right here.
How do you pronounce it? I always say Fashanu. It's not correct?
I also did but apparently it's Fashanu.
That doesn't sound right.
He apparently said that it's Fashanu. So yeah, you have him
wrong. I think he's wrong about his own name.
Okay, and then so you have him 3rd. You have him right behind Latham, and then you have Fuaga was your 8th overall prospect, your 4th tackle, and then you have Fautanu as your number 11, not on the top 10 big board.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about just about those different guys and what you see in each one of them that made you go in that order?
Well, so before I go into this, disclaimer, I have not dug into the film. So take this with a grain of salt. Latham is the guy that keeps sticking in my head because he fits what Douglas loves. Just that Douglas eye. He likes the bigger guys. Latham has the longest arms. He's a mauler. He fits the man gap principle. And I keep saying man gap principle scheme. It's not like they're not going to run zone. They're going to run zone, of course, but the guys they have, Simpson, pulling, kicking out, Moses, even Tyron Smith, who could do everything. I feel like they're going to be a bully offensive line in a lot of ways, and Latham fits that better than anybody. Alt does too, but I don't think they think they're going to get Alt. If Alt drops to 10, I think they'll pounce immediately.
Very unlikely. Between the Chargers and the Titans, one of those teams is very likely to take
the
ball.
Titans pass, you could see the Chargers going receiver no matter what.
So the people thought the Chargers with receiver, but then Harbaugh went off on a thing about how important the offensive line is, but that could be a smokescreen. So
listen, he does love his offensive lineman, no question. But I could see them going either way. Yeah, I agree. It's unlikely. Alt falls.
But the Titans, after they signed Ridley, seemed very likely to go tackle. They need 2 tackles actually. So they played Skoronski last year at guard, and so I think it seems pretty clear that they're going to go tackle.
Yeah, I think so too. And the question is Alt the only tackle off the board by the time it gets to 10? And if that's the case, I would venture to say I'd be surprised if they don't trade down or want to trade down, I should say.
Well, want is the correct thing.
Yeah, wanting to and executing are 2 different things. So If Alt's the only guy off the board, I think they'll want to trade down.
Because JJ McCarthy's rise has hurt the Jets a little bit because when he was projected, early in the cycle, he was not close to the top 10. And so people were talking about potentially someone coming up to 10 to get him, trying to jump, let's say, the Vikings, the Broncos, the Raiders, or someone jumping there. But now he's projected he could go in the top 4. Some people even have him listed at the number 2, which to me boggles my mind. But to me, JJ McCarthy is this year's Zach Wilson, except he's not as talented.
Yeah, God, I had a guy in my head who McCarthy was a perfect comparison, but I forgot who it was. It'll come to me. But I had a guy in my head that was perfect. Yeah, I'm not in love with McCarthy either. I am in love with his intangibles and his who he is, his mind. Just the talent's not there. So we'll see.
That's why top 10 pick, what on earth? Top 5 pick, what on earth?
Okay, quarterbacks, it's like slot machines. The quarterbacks in the draft these days, since the Bradford draft, when they changed the entire structure of the contracts with these rookies, it's part of the reason why so many quarterbacks bust these days is because so many are getting pushed into the top 5 and the top 10 because GMs know, hey, I'll take a chance on one. And if it doesn't work out, I could easily pivot. It's not like the old days. Mm-hmm. So, I'm not trying to, back cover Douglas here, but that's part of the equation where, you could take a quarterback and pivot if it doesn't work. And they really did that, as long as Rodgers stays healthy, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. I wanted to actually shift gears for a minute and just ask you something. I heard something interesting that Saleh said the other day. They asked him about the defense and how, the defensive line and how they changed some things up. And he said something about with Kinlaw and Fotu, what he said is we got bigger along the defensive line without sacrificing athleticism. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that? And what do you think about the Jets' interior defensive line compared to last year?
So as a whole, this brings up a good point. One of the scuttlebutts about the Jets the last few seasons is that they're too light and they get pushed around too much in the trenches. Even with Mekhi out there, but without Mekhi, too light, get pushed around, offensive line and interior defensive line against the run. Let's face it, they're not a good run defense. They haven't been under Saleh. I don't care what their defensive rank was last year. They would get gashed up the middle. And if they were in tight games where the run pass option was still there, they were not a good run defense. They were only solid when they were losing by a lot and the offense was going to run. So what did they do this offseason? They got bigger on the offensive line, much bigger with Tyron Smith and Simpson and Moses. And I guess they got bigger on the D line. I mean, JFM's still going to play edge in the base, move to the inside in the sub. Leaky is going to be an important player. And Kinlaw, I guess they got a little bigger.
He's 6'6", 324, something like that. But he doesn't play that size.
Al Woods was huge, though. So I don't know if they got that much bigger.
Well, Fotu is like 334. But the thing is about them is that neither player really plays that big. If you watch Kinlaw is like a classic Jets defensive tackle, penetrating and just gets pushed aside and cracks and and counters and draws and things like that.
I think Saleh's we got bigger applies to last offseason, not this offseason, because last offseason they made the first pivot to actually bring in a guy, welcome in a 2-gapper who stands people up and could play the 3-4, Al Woods. Prior to that, they maintained a stubborn feel with who they brought in on the D line. Guys who shoot the gap, aggressively go downhill, fit the scheme. So I think what Saleh's saying is right, but I think it applies to last offseason, not this offseason.
But he specifically mentioned Kinlaw and Fotu.
Yeah, well, he's just typing guys up. He's just typing guys up.
Yeah, because of just watching Fotu, I didn't watch a ton of him, but what you see is he just doesn't seem to be like, even though he's officially that size, he's not that same stout, give no ground guy that Al Woods was. He can get pushed around for a guy that size.
IDL is still a major need.
But do you think they think that way? Meaning, do you think they're going to draft an IDL or sign someone?
I think they'll draft one.
Okay, because I imagine fourth round, fifth round.
Yeah, where? I don't know. But I think they need IDL help for sure.
What about safety?
Yeah, safety is a tough one. I don't know. It's, uh, I really do hope Ashton returns. Is he still a free agent? He didn't sign
He is.
recently,
He
right?
is a free agent. It was reported that he wanted to start somewhere. The chances that that actually happens are very slim, though, because guys like Justin Simmons, Quandre Diggs are still free agents. These are actual starters, and so safeties are kind of a dime a dozen to find. So I'm still hopeful he'll be back too. But do you think that
Yeah.
they draft one? Because I see a lot of Jet fans acting like the Jets still need a replacement for Jordan Whitehead. To me, that's Chuck Clark. I don't know about what you think.
Yeah, well, no, I kind of view it when a guy gets hurt for the season, I put him in a category where I can't rely on him. And,
Mm.
Rodgers is a little different because of who he is, but um I could see Chuck Clark taking that role easily. I'd be happy with that, but you need another body or two for sure. You need a contingency plan. And whether that comes from the draft or a late veteran signing, I don't know. But you just hit it. Those are the two sneaky needs they need: IDL and safety.
Do you think that they trust themselves to be able to develop Jarek Bernard Converse as a safety? Like they did with Pinnock a bit?
He's gonna be in the mix for sure. Um, so he'll be one of four or one of five. And then you got Clark. So you got Clark, Adams, Converse. You need at
That's
least
all they
one
have
more.
now, yeah.
Yeah, you need at least one more, possibly two. Um, I wish there was an IDL or two in the top 10 or 15 to see if there would be any smoke for the Jets to um have a connection to one of those guys, but the board just isn't lining up that way, unfortunately.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Let's get to the chat a bit. Try to answer some question here. We got over here. Good afternoon. Hi Hawk, thanks so much for joining. Ronald Perry, Rivka, me and Aladoda say hello. Hi guys. Let's see. 13 years of no playoffs will do that in terms of not trusting the Jets to do anything. Yes, I mean
Yeah,
SOJ lives until it doesn't.
yeah.
Dakota, Robby Sabo, and Rivka Boord, thanks. Um, let's see. Hey Rivka, I love her. Any chance the Raiders move up and we throw in a third? Can we land Devontae? I'll let you take this one.
I doubt it. I honestly doubt it. In I mean, what would you be willing to give up? It's crazy. All these receiver trades, they're always lower in trade return than what you think it's going to be. Would that apply to Devontae is the question. I don't know. I would say so, but I don't think it would be as low as you see with other examples. I'm going to say no. I'll give it a 95% no on Devontae.
So I think the minute they resigned, they brought in Antonio Pierce to be their permanent head coach.
That's the reason.
That was done. The Raiders were clearly not rebuilding. They don't look themselves or they're not looking at themselves as a rebuilding team, and therefore they're not going to trade Devontae. I mean, if I were the Raiders, I might consider trading Devontae, kind of like the Bills did with Diggs, where you trade him a year early rather than a year late, because he is getting older and he does cost a lot of money. But they want him, and he's happy there. He's said a lot of things about Antonio Pierce. He was very happy with him, and so
And
I just think that ship's in.
yeah, I think so too. And plus, let's be honest, the NFL doesn't want the Raiders to rebuild. They they want a good team in Vegas if
Hmm.
possible. So that would be the last thing the NFL wants.
Hmm. Let's see what Hawk has to say. He says JD trades have been really good, masterful. Even I would agree with that. He's done a very good job on the trade market.
Yeah, see, and listen, any Douglas criticism I understand based on the results, but I'm still so much higher on Douglas than I am the coaching. And maybe it's my perspective. I coach high school ball, so maybe I just focus in on the coaching too much. But when I look at this roster, the talent, everything he's flipped over and changed comparatively to McCagnon and Idzik, he's done a great job in my mind. It's just hasn't worked out, and it does fall on him ultimately. The coaching is what I'm really nervous about.
I mean, it's a big issue. I mean, particularly having a offensive coordinator who's basically the laughing stock of the league, and you're just basically relying on Rodgers to be the offensive coordinator.
Well, I mean, if so, if Rodgers said, "I'll only come to you guys if you bring Hackett along," would you have done it?
And he probably did say that. I mean, look, it was a catch-22. I can't answer that question. I have
You,
to
you,
say, if you had asked me last year, I would have said yes. After this year's experience, considering what Sean Payton had said about him previously, it's very tough.
you got to do it. It's Aaron Rodgers. But I'm saying that, and I'm the guy who got crushed for defending LaFleur and saying the Jets shouldn't have fired LaFleur.
And I thought
So
they should have fired him. Nanny
yeah,
has said they shouldn't have. Yeah.
yeah, I was defending the guy. Like, what can you do? I mean, the quarterback stinks. You have all these injuries. You have no O-line. What? It's not LaFleur's fault. But hey, I was okay with it. Hackett, listen, never a fan. People said he was the head coach. What he did as a head coach shouldn't matter as an OC. Yes, it does matter because you're still a leader, and that stuff matters. But all in all, would I have fired LaFleur if it meant Rodgers? Yes. So I can't get on him too much anymore.
I hear that. Let's say this: the guys remember Cook terrible. They're talking about in terms of JD, bringing in Cook, and I know you and I disagreed
What's
about Cook
the?
last year.
It's a late signing. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, it's a summer camp signing where you're given a nod to Rodgers. He wanted it. They were talking. If you signed him in free agency where it was a option A or option B, yeah, I'm incredibly mad at that money for a running back. But happening in August where there's no other alternative, that's where I don't go. It's like the Ryan Khalil signing. Fans got on Douglas for Ryan Khalil. How? The guy didn't have a draft. He knew the offensive line sucked, so he took a flyer on a guy for 1 year who used to be good. Didn't work out. Like the context is really important.
I understand that. The way I saw it was the guy stinks, and if you watch his film, you can see it. So why are you signing him?
Aaron Rodgers.
I understand that. I do. But now you wonder if Rodgers has any humility to have realized that every single guy that he wanted last season stunk. Like they weren't just below average; they stunk.
Well, what have they done in free agency so far this year?
True. It's true. That's 100% true. And to a certain extent, you wonder if they just told him, "Hey, Aaron, maybe let the GM do his job."
Sure. But again, like Dalvin, it was so meaningless, honestly. Like you had Brees, you had Michael Carter. Are we clamoring for Michael Carter? Really? Like
No,
he's such a
I
he.
like Bam Knight. I know Bam Knight was a jag, but I
I
still
like
like
Bam
Bam
Knight too.
Knight.
I liked Bam Knight too, but the O line, Rodgers going down is such a meaningless thing, honestly. There was nothing else that would have happened if you hadn't signed Dalvin Cook. It,
Well,
the
you'd have the money
optics,
rolled over to this season.
barely, like not much. I think the worst part about it is the optics. That's what
Mhm.
fans get wrapped into. Like, oh, you're doing everything Rodgers wants, and who's running the team, and then fans get upset that the media takes that and turns it into something. So I get that point of it.
Okay,
And
fair enough.
OBJ, let me say this: if they had signed OBJ because of Rodgers, I would have lost my mind.
I know you're very anti OBJ, and I'm not.
Because
I was very anti him last year because of the money, but not because of the player.
oh, he's just doesn't have any explosiveness anymore. He has nothing left, and I get like we talk about Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook, I get Dalvin Cook wasn't as good, but I see Dalvin Cook as having a much better chance going into last year. This is to be productive compared to OBJ, from what I've seen. But it's one and the same. Let's be honest.
I mean, ultimately they stayed away from OBJ because of the money. So it was just interesting that then, but I guess Cook came later in the process.
Who did sign first? It had to have been OBJ, right?
And no, it was OBJ. It was significantly before. It was OBJ signed before DeAndre Hopkins did.
Oh, that's right.
So
Yeah, he was early.
yeah, yeah. OBJ was earlier. Let's see, someone write about it. His health is my main worry. His down year involved a broken finger and a number one receiver named Alan Lazard, so I don't see that as him falling off. It's more health for me. Meaning 2022, Rodgers had a down year for him. And so he's saying, he had a broken finger. Lazard was his number one receiver. Were you concerned when the Jets got Rodgers about him already having fallen off?
No, not at all. I don't think he's fallen up whatsoever in terms of his arm, his mind. Nah. Like what he did in the preseason against the Giants. I know it wasn't their starters, but it passes the eye test easily. And all elite quarterbacking is taking what the defense gives you. That's all it is. Someone asked me the other day, the problem with the Jets, they said this, they don't have an identity. And I responded by saying, okay, what was the Packers' identity with Rodgers as quarterback? And they couldn't provide an answer. Like what was the Packers' offensive identity with Rodgers at quarterback? No.
Let Rodgers do his thing. I mean,
Yeah, you let the quarterback scan the defense at the line and take what the defense gives you. And what you saw in preseason against the Giants, first play, he gets up there, looks at the defense, they're playing off, single high, little smoke screen, touch your hat, smoke screen to Garrett Wilson, gets a first down. He just takes what they give you, get in the red zone, quick 3-step back pedal, back shoulder to Garrett, boom, touchdown. So, he hasn't lost it from that perspective. Just got to stay healthy.
okay. Let's see. Speaking of terrible, that Lazard is borderline pathetic. To what extent, let's say with Lazard, to what extent do you think Rodgers can help him somewhat, and to what extent is it just that he has the worst hands that you've ever seen?
Yeah, it'll help. Rodgers will help him greatly, but the way I view it is I don't want to be relying on Lazard for anything. He has to be a clear second unit guy in my mind.
So that makes him receiver 4, in other words? Like you want but that means that they must draft a receiver 3
Yes.
at minimum. And to me, I mean, I'm still on the board of if they can bring back Corey Davis and draft a receiver, I'd be happy with that. That would make me happy.
Yeah, me too, 100%. And I love Xavier Gibson. He has to play slot if you're going 11 personnel, which would bump Garrett outside. But there's a lot you could do with tight formations where you have Xavier running jet motions and orbit motions that could really open up the inside for Garrett, where Garrett's still on the inside.
So you'd say sign Corey Davis, draft a guy, basically use Gibson as your backup slot, and just say, Lazard, you're on the team for $11 million.
Yes.
And then we'll cut you after the season.
Yes. 100%.
I mean, I have to say I take a bit of a victory lap on that one, because before the Jets signed Lazard, I went through the receivers available, and I said that none of them were better than Corey Davis. I said the only one who I could see you saying was an upgrade worth getting was Jacoby Myers, and I said Lazard definitely isn't.
Yeah, I was never a fan of the Lazard signing either. And when a big thing like Rodgers happens, things get overlooked, and the Lazard signing as a whole in Jets fandom was, ooh, this means Rodgers is coming, not
exactly
how good or bad was this signing. So
exactly.
The fan base gets swept up from time to time.
I mean, according to Lazard, he's the one who went to Douglas and asked him to go because he thought Rodgers was coming to the Jets.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sound like that convinced Rodgers to come. So you just wonder about it.
You wonder. It's but then again, I don't think there's any chance that the Jets and Rodgers didn't have this thing locked up well before it was announced.
Meaning it was just that the trade had to go through, but meaning that he knew that he was going to the Jets.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked that, and this is not official, so no one take this and run with it, but I wouldn't be shocked that this thing was wrapped up towards the end of the regular season.
That's interesting. I'm not sure if I would quite agree with that one, but I would say from when they signed Hackett as the OC that it was probably a done deal.
Oh, it was wrapped up definitely before they signed Hackett. Okay. No question about it. And I'm not saying that it was wrapped up before the regular season ended. I'm just saying I wouldn't be shocked.
Okay.
Best guess is that it was wrapped up probably during playoff time or right after the Super Bowl. And when was Hackett brought in? Do you remember?
I don't remember exactly. I think it was after the Super Bowl, though.
Yeah, I might look at it.
I could be wrong.
Any other questions out there?
Yeah, so now someone asked, any chance the Jets use the fullback like the 49ers do this year? So first of all, I was not particularly impressed with Nick Boord when he was on the field, but the Jets didn't seem that inclined to use him. So what do you think about that?
Late January was Hackett, January 26th.
So
okay. Yeah, I think so Rodgers was wrapped up. I think Rodgers was wrapped up in the playoffs at some point. What I think about Boord, I think they're going to keep him. I think he's going to be on the roster unless they find a better fullback somewhere.
But they barely used him. What's the point in carrying a fullback if you use him for like 3 snaps a game?
Well, a bunch of factors. They're always losing. I mean, last year was a disaster. They didn't. I say they're always losing, but then again, a lot of games were still in structure because Saleh made it so. Like, he made it in a way where it was conservative, so they had chances to use him. I just think when offensive linemen get hurt, it's tougher to run those more complex rushing schemes where a fullback's involved. And you're going to run a fullback more involved in the rushing scheme if it's more gap man principle stuff. And the opportunity just wasn't there. And Zach Wilson, too. Again, having a fullback in there, it puts more on the quarterback. It does. It helps the quarterback, but pre-snap, it puts more on him. This year is probably going to be different as long as, assuming health, of course. So I could see Bowden being much more of a factor, but he's not going to. How much did he play last year? What was the percentage?
Let's see.
What did you say before?
No, I said he's played like 3 snaps a game. I don't know if that's actually accurate, but that's what it seemed like to me.
Gotcha. Yeah, it'll be more. It'll be more this year. It would be my guess.
Yeah, he played 13% of their offensive snaps.
That's more than I thought, actually. To be honest, it'll never be much more than 20%. 20% would be the high mark. I mean, it's an 11 personnel league. It's a 3 receiver league. You have a lot more based on the rules. You have a lot more success running out of more spread formations rather than packing it in for obvious reasons. So, the fullback's already on the endangered list. I think they'll keep him around because Rodgers loves fullbacks, but don't expect more than 15% probably.
I mean, for what it's worth, the Jets ran better out of 12 personnel than 11 personnel last season, whereas the year before they ran better out of 11 than 12 because they had Corey Davis.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. And it makes sense, too, based on how banged up the O-line was. If you get an extra chipper, extra body in there, in line, sometimes that's the only way that could help, especially in pass pro, if you're going to throw out a 12 personnel. So that makes sense.
Okay, let's go on. Different question about the turf. Everybody says that Rodgers' injury was a fluke. Is the turf dangerous? What do you think?
Man. I mean, the biggest things, the roster and the depth chart are always important, and who your coaches are and Rodgers' health. But to me, the biggest 2 things were injuries and the turf. And, Douglas implemented that injury prevention system. It seemed to be working for a little bit at some point last year, and then AVT and Brees went down and all hell broke loose. And then this past year again, I don't know. I don't think there's not much you could do about the turf. They're not going to change it. Woody's not going to change it. Rodgers defends MetLife Stadium. I'm not a big MetLife Stadium fan. I think they could have done a lot better, both them and the Giants. But it is what it is. Do I think it's overblown? Yes. There's no way it's as bad as people are making it out to be, especially when looking at the numbers. I don't have them, so don't ask me about them. But could it be an actual concern? Yeah, for sure, because perception is reality. And when perception is reality, whether it's true or not, you're screwed. So we'll see. Injuries on the turf, Rivka. We'll see what happens this offseason. I mean,
so the one thing I want to say is I don't believe in the turf when it comes to Rodgers' injury because it was a contact injury.
Oh, Rodgers specifically? No, I don't.
Yeah. No, it was contacted. You could see it on the rebound on it. You could see it on like all those amateur people who showed, afterward you could see it snap. It was because he was hit in a weird position. That would have happened anywhere. I don't think that had anything to do. But when Garrett Wilson caught his toe in the turf against the Eagles, that was the turf, and he went out and cursed out the turf after the game. He was okay. He didn't break anything, but he came up, limping, and you could see how close he came to something, a serious injury, because he caught it. He got his toe caught in the turf.
Yeah. And Jalen Phillips for Miami was at the Jets. It does happen everywhere. Rodgers, I agree with you 100%. It was physical in nature. The Rodgers injury was more a hyped up juices flowing moment.
Mhm.
Yeah, Rodgers has a history of moving around and making something happen out of structure, but first series of the game, you're gonna want to, just throw it away, just ground it. He was already in trouble before that play, so I just attribute it to him trying to make something happen, and
Yeah.
he
How did
shouldn't
you
have.
react when that happened? Like, just as a fan, like, what was your
Oh,
reaction?
uh, so I was in the press box at the time, so when I'm in that mode, and even these days, like I grew up a diehard Jets fan, but even these days, because I'm closer to it, in the press box or at practice, the fandom in me is gone. Like I always want to see them do well, but I always try to just keep my objective hat on. However, I could say when that happened in the press box, I looked around and everyone was just shaking their head, like, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. It was such a deflating moment for everyone involved because even though all the beat reporters are objective, they want to see good football. They want to see the team do well. That's one. And also the other thing is Rodgers, that was the same calf he hurt in OTAs. Everyone had the same reaction on the first day of OTAs when he hurt his calf. So it was a double whammy last year. It was insane.
You could just imagine what's going to happen if a Jet player tweaks their calf during at any point in the season. What's going to because AVT also hurt his ankle or his calf or something in like during preseason or during training camp at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I could imagine walking in and seeing, those big industrial sized bubble wraps just lined up everywhere.
Exactly, exactly, especially for Rodgers and
Yeah.
AVT. Yeah. And it's crazy because Al was also Achilles. They went three different guys tore their Achilles in the same season.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And then,
Everyone, and it's across the league. I mean, the
I mean, the
Jets,
49ers, look what happened to Greenlaw in the Super Bowl.
yeah. Yeah. Running in
That was
from the sideline.
horrible, horrible. He's just jumping up, whatever. And yeah, terrible
And
stuff.
listen, the Jets have had it worse than others, but it's across the league, and it's because of the new CBA. Plain and simple. When you take it easy during practice to this degree, you're gonna get more injuries, period.
But do you think that this does reduce, I don't know, the head injuries or things like that? Or you think not that either? It's just
Um,
when you take it easy, you're not poised and then you take the head injuries too.
I would guess that it does reduce the head injuries, but I don't think it's worth it on the other side for the other injuries because much more money is lost from a player's point of view.
But life, quality of life.
I don't know. I can't. I'm not even gonna guess on that one because I don't know to what
Well, I'm
degree.
very scared. I'm very cynical about that. I read, I didn't watch Concussion, but I read, I forgot what the book is called, about not Concussion. It was a different book written a couple years earlier about
Mhm.
this concussion thing. I don't believe that any of the measures that they put in place really help reduce anything because ultimately the issue is not concussions as much as it is the subconcussive hits that they take on every play.
Well, that's a great point. That's just it. See, you're arguing, and I agree with you. The NFL will put certain measures in that are virtue signals, basically
Exactly.
that look good, but don't really address the issue. And I would agree to a certain extent because I mean the greatest to me the greatest issue impacting head injuries is trench play, and trench play, just hitting heads and everybody boom, boom, boom. And an easy way to stop that is softer helmets. But it's never been official, but this is certainly the case. They don't want to remove that because they love the sounds that it makes. So there's a lot there. I just think if I'm the players, I don't want to do anything to the CBA to make practice any lighter than it is because I think it's hurting them in the long run.
But do you think they agree with that? Because if anything, it's the Players Association pushing for it.
Yeah, I think most of the players would agree with me. It's just that they need to fight for something. Number one, like they need to fight for something. Number one, and number two, if they're getting paid more and practicing less, do they really care? Like it's such a tough connection to make. and to
Yeah.
a realization to come to.
I mean, there's
So
also a lot of controversy about this. I think someone like Belichick believed, I think he would scream every year about the lack of practice, but then there are other coaches that insist our guys don't need the practice, and the practice just hurts, raises injuries. So there's no consensus about it.
there's no consensus, but all the best coaches push the issue, push the envelope, and um, the thing I really hate is I don't love the new kickoff rule, but I do think it's better than what they've had because assuming they moved the touchback, which I think they did, right? Did they move the
Depending if
touchback?
it lands, if the ball lands in the whatever they called it, the landing zone, then I think it and then goes. I don't know if it goes straight through the end zone, it goes to the 30 instead of the 25.
So they moved the. I agree with it to make more action happen. It's better than what they had, where one of every 100 kickoffs resulted in a return. I'll put it that way.
Hmm.
But compared to what it was 20 years ago, I hate it. And the only thing I wanted was for them to make the onside legit again, and they didn't do that.
And they did the opposite. Yeah, they didn't do that. Well, that's why the Eagles propose every year a 4th and 20 play.
Yeah, I'd rather have that for sure.
But I think the NFL competition committee just sees it as too gimmicky. But I would
What the
rather.
hell is the kickoff? I mean, what is this
Exactly.
kickoff? Like, come on, guys.
Exactly. Okay, but wrapping that up. Now, someone said it's hard to figure out if Bowers fits, so I would draft a tackle. Fuaga's a great run blocker who can back up both tackles and guard spots. Have you watched Fuaga at all? I think Joe's review just came up.
Yeah,
I didn't watch
go check out Blewett's review on it. I have not watched enough to give you a detailed response on Fuaga, honestly.
Yeah.
I could just give you a point of view from what Douglas probably thinks, and I would venture to guess that he likes Alt obviously better, and sneakily likes Latham because of his attributes, and I think Fasciano and Fuaga is the close one. Those two are close, neck and neck to me.
You think because of let's say Fuaga's shorter arms?
Fasciano's he's the much more classical tackle based on his body, but he is, from what I've seen so far, he gets in his own head at times. Like, he's so mechanical and just doesn't take a deep breath and go play. And I haven't watched enough of Fuaga, but I don't think Fuaga is that. So I think Douglas would like Fasciano's body better, but perhaps would like Fuaga's mentality better.
And now with I'm gonna just try to I'm trying to practice his Fasciano, right? So if I'm trying to practice it. So do you think the fact that he's a left tackle makes any difference to Douglas?
Yeah, I do. I do think it makes a difference. And I think that was one of the reasons why I had him over Fuaga. It does matter. Did Fuaga play any left tackle at college, or was it exclusively right tackle?
I believe it was exclusively right tackle.
I knew this past year was exclusively right, but I wasn't sure about his whole career. I do think it matters.
I mean, because Latham is also a right tackle.
Yeah, Latham's also right, but I think Latham could do both. I think Latham is that sneaky body and athletic. Latham's the guy that is perfect for the way the Jets are set up right now. Assuming Tyron doesn't get hurt tomorrow. Assuming you have Tyron healthy, because Latham would be that red shirt, learn from this legend guy, and we'll get you in at left, we'll get you in at right. You're going to practice. Hopefully you don't see the field early, and we're going to turn you into a stud. That's why I keep seeing Latham as their preference after all.
I mean, based on the big boards and the way all the, Latham is like an afterthought to many people compared to some of the other tackles. So it seems to me to be possible that you could trade back at least a few spots and still get him. But unless the NFL has a different take.
No, for sure. He's a late riser. There's a lot of places that have Latham coming in hot and the number 2 guy, but you're right. Most places don't. So I think he won't go in the top 10. I don't think. No way. So I think you could easily trade down and snag Latham.
I mean, and that's where I would be very happy if the Jets did something like that. Get another, at least, even if you can't trade back to get a second, at least get another third, and then you still get a guy who's who really fills a need and could be your starting tackle next year.
Yeah. Yeah, and
So,
Latham. See, the thing I hate these. Yeah, you could look at film, you could guess, but you gotta meet these kids. You gotta know what they're all about. Like that's the biggest thing. And I think Douglas, his critical mistake that first year with Mackay was maybe COVID hurt him because you really didn't get to. It's just so crazy. His first draft, COVID hits, and he doesn't
yeah.
get to go through the usual process. So maybe that hurt him. I hope that hurt him because it didn't work out. But what kind of kid is Latham? Does he love the sport? We know he's got that pedigree, and I think that's the most attractive thing. He's a giant too at 6'9". Latham's got those raw attributes, but what kind of kid is he? What kind of kid is Fashanu, right?
Yeah, you
Fashanu.
got it.
Yep. What kind of kid is Fullback?
I'm pretty sure Latham was let me check this up. No, he wasn't. I thought he was a captain, but I don't
Latham
think
was
he
not.
was.
Was
No, I
Fashanu?
don't. Let me check this up. Fashanu captain.
Yeah, that's a good question.
It looks like he was actually. It says named a team captain at the conclusion of spring. Yeah, JD likes that.
JD loves his captains and seniors.
Well, that's another thing. Fashanu's young. I think he's 21. I think Alta's also. I think that they may be early.
Yeah, Alt was a junior. Yep.
Yeah. So interesting. Someone mentioned over here, AVT is injury prone, so you need a credible backup. Other than Schweitzer, they don't have any other interior depth. You think they do that in the draft, or you think they're going to try to sign someone? Because there still are guys out there.
Yeah, there's still guys. I mean, McGovern's still out there too, right? So
doesn't really fit the gap scheme, but
no, he doesn't. But he'd be okay as a backup.
Backup, yeah. I mean, and they signed McGovern kind of later last year too. They weren't seemingly interested. He ended up signing for 1.9 million. So this year you sign him for the minimum. You can probably still get serviceable play out of him.
Yeah, they'll definitely bring in more bodies for sure. And AVT, as much as it kills me, yeah, he's injury prone. There's no way around it. Like it's tough to rely on him.
Well, that brings me also interestingly to Fautanu, because one of the things about him that people like is the fact that he played tackle, but he can also play guard. And so some people see him as a sort of AVT light in that, he can also be a backup there and potentially even push Simpson for the starting lineup, although I don't see that happening. But they just see it as, he can kind of slide in all over the place depending on need. What would you say to that?
I think, I mean, as long as he passes all the human tests, is he a good kid? Does he like ball? Is he good for the culture? I think they would like him a lot. But talent-wise, that would be a really trade down and snag him. I think.
Like 17, 18, like go down 7, 8, 9 spots. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's the type of guy I would want if you're going to get it back a second round pick.
Yeah, agreed. That I would do that in a heartbeat if you're going to definitely get a second round pick. Yeah, that's a good call. He could play both. People are questioning if he's going to be a tackle at the next level.
Well, he has the arm length, but he's short for the position.
Yeah.
And Blewett said he likes him better in a phone booth because he's just a little bit more controlled, whereas at tackle he's a little bit out of control and also not as powerful. He's just not, even though he said usually guys who are not as powerful, you want the guys with the power at guard, but he said in this case it's just he'll be able to hone his technique better and not be on an island with guys.
That's why people were shocked at Tippmann's height. 6'6" for a center is really outlandish, and yet he makes it work. So I could see him playing both. I just don't know. It's tough to know where the Jets have these guys ranked. It really is.
Do you know who this guy's talking about? The guy from Yale is a great player that can be great. His only knock is the competition he played, and we can get him at 72. The guy from Yale.
I have no idea.
Yeah. Lawrence, if you want to write in the chat which guy you're talking about, because we're not sure.
Yale. Are you talking about the crew team? Crew team, like the rowing or football?
No, he said we can get him at 72. So presumably,
lineman.
Okay.
I think I think I do know who he's talking about. Hold on, let me look it up.
Yeah, I don't follow college anything, so those things are going to largely go over my head until I take a crash course draft time.
I love college. I'll always love college football, but I'm in a love-hate relationship with them, with a lot of things they've done over the last 10, 20 years. Conference realignment, how long the games take, 90 plays a game per offense. It's insane. So I hear you. Kieran, yeah, the Kieran kid, the tackle.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's definitely an option if they don't go offensive tackle in the first round. I'll say that.
Yeah, just the thing about people keep saying, "Oh, they're both deep, so don't commit to tackle." The thing is, most quality starting tackles in the NFL are drafted in the first round.
Yeah, for sure.
That's just a reality.
For
You know,
sure. And as
whereas
deep as you
receiver, you can go fourth, fifth, sixth round and still get a guy who can play.
yes, and as deep as tackle may be this year, it's never as deep as receiver or tight end.
And all the depth is also in the first round. Like all those guys who they say it's so deep, there are as many as 8 tackles who can go in the first round this year.
Mhm. O-line's tricky. It's like you see a lot of late round offensive linemen come into their own and turn into something, but it only happens if the O-line has a culture and an aura about them. Like if you could plug that guy into an existing unit that's already functioning, and the
Like the
Jets don't
Eagles
have
or
that yet.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the Eagles, how they just kind of replenish. Like they'll probably be fine without Kelsey because they
Yes.
just develop their talent.
Like the
Um,
Cleveland, Wyatt Teller wasn't a
mhm,
high pick, but their
mhm.
line has been solid for a long time, and while Wyatt Teller kinda was the genesis of the line, someone could argue, but I think they were already good before he got there, so that's a pretty good example right there.
Mhm. I mean, I think
And
they
the
lost Callahan. No, wasn't he with them, and now he went to Tennessee.
yes, yeah, they lost Callahan, which, you know, Jets know a thing or two about a Callahan back in the day. And the thing I'll say about this, the most optimism about the Jets is their O-line is veteran laden, and all
Mhm,
the O-lines across the league are veteran first and foremost, which is crazy to say, but it's the truth because
mhm,
it takes forever for these guys to develop with the way O-line is played in high school and college these days.
mhm. Makes sense. Now, this said, I heard Bakhtiari isn't passing a physical until June, and reports and rumors are we'll be signing him as a late roster. It makes sense.
Yeah, I would say I'd be surprised if he's not a Jet, to be honest.
Mhm. Now, this one, the ironic fit is that now that Becton is gone and we're switching to a power scheme, which Becton would be good at theoretically.
Yeah, theoretically.
Yeah, in
Um
practice, he just wasn't good at anything last year.
Theoretically, see, Becton could be good at anything theoretically. It's
Mhm,
just it's a matter of will. It's a matter of internal battle with, a kid like Mackay, honestly.
mhm.
That and his physical, status, which
I
you
mean,
could
I think he
understand.
was in shape last year. It just didn't. He just played miserably.
Yes, and listen, taking a year off from football is hard to come back. Forget 2. It's like another world. Taking 2 years
Mhm.
off and trying to stay at the top level in the NFL, that is such an hard ask. So, I wouldn't be shocked if he plays a lot better this year, Becton. Um,
He's
but
not
he's
going to
gotta
get a starting job. Someone will sign him as a backup and
yeah.
give him some
He
sort
he's
of,
gotta he's gotta
incentive deal
he's gotta stay healthy, and you know what? I hadn't ruled Becton out yet for the Jets. I mean, now I do, but going into the free agency because of
with Rodgers.
the Rodgers relationship, and if he's willing to take less. I think at this point, I definitely rule it out, but it would have been interesting to me to bring
I
him
mean,
back
also
as a
posting about Keith Carter or, liking.
yeah,
I mean, Brees did it too, but
that's the other thing. Hey, listen, Keith Carter, I don't know. I don't know. I never talked to him. Um, I don't know how great a coach he is, but I'll say this: it's not the worst thing in the world if players hate a coach. A lot of players hated Bill Parcells at the time. Um, he's one of the most beloved coaches
Sims
now.
starting with Sims. Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes a great coach understands that you know hate is a good thing for a lot of different people,
Well,
and
I was
it
hoping he would just get on Tomlinson and Becton and get Tomlinson's head back on straight, but that didn't happen.
no, no, and I applaud Tomlinson's availability, but he didn't
He's
have
not
much.
signed yet. He's
No,
not signed yet. There's a reason.
he fell off a cliff. He was a scheme shot for the Jets. And see, I think Salah, one of the things he's learned, and I do see it. One of the things he's learned is he relied too much on scheme offensively and defensively when he first came in as a head coach. And he's realized you can't do that. You got to bend. You got to be versatile. You got to be a chameleon as much as you can. He had LaFleur, he had Laken Tomlinson. He tried to emulate the Niners off. Gap attacking 4-3 scheme with no big guys. Like their biggest D tackle was Quinnen Williams at one point. You can't do that. You gotta be free. You gotta be versatile.
Okay, I really don't like Bowers. I'd rather give up this year's 4th and next year's 3rd for Neighbors. I don't think that's enough to get up to get Neighbors.
No, not even close.
I think at minimum it's next year's. It would be next year's 2nd, and possibly more than that.
Where's Neighbors projected right now? 6? Giants?
5, 6. Chargers, Giants, somewhere in that neighborhood. Yeah.
So to move from 10 to 6, my gosh, that would be a lot.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't think it would be anywhere close to that. I think you might even have to give up next year's 1st, which I'm not 100% willing to do. Even for Harrison, I'd be a little sketchy about that.
I would say, 2 seconds or a 1st probably. For even those 4. I'm not looking at the point system, but that would be my ballpark.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I'm willing to do that. I'm on the conservative side when it comes to trading.
No, I wouldn't do that either.
Yeah. Let's see. I was watching some old Jets games last night, and it dawned on me that the reason the team was good in 09-10 is because we had Thomas Jones and Sean Green averaging 180 rushing yards per game. The one thing I have to say about that is that their yards per carry average was never that great. They would just run and run and run, and they didn't care if they got 2 yards each time.
Yeah, the reason they were good on offense is because of Nick Mangold, DeBrickshaw Ferguson, Alan Faneca, Brandon Moore. Like that's the reason.
Yeah.
They had one of the best O-lines I had seen in a long time. So
and I was spoiled. I got, because it was my early years as a fan when they drafted Brick and Mangold. So, you think, oh, the Jets offensive line will always be good.
Yeah. And look, remember all the hype that draft? Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush.
Yeah, I remember that. Well, the whole Reggie Bush thing, and Mario Williams ends up going
Fans
before
wanted Leinart so badly.
Yeah.
And Mangini and Tannenbaum said, no. And mostly Mangini, I think, because once Mangini left, Tannenbaum was crap with Rex. They said, no, we're going to do this the right way. And we draft Brick, the boring pick. We draft Mangold later, who turned out to even be a better pick. And off they go. And the other thing, Callahan, as the O-line coach. They were so spoiled to have Callahan as that O-line coach. You would not believe. Coaching in football is everything. And that's going to be the big thing for the Jets this year.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. We need another stud running back. It's a sneaky hole. So I wouldn't say they need a stud running back. They definitely do need a number 2. I don't think Izzy comes anywhere near that.
We'll see. I mean, if their O-line does round into shape, I think Izzy could do something. But as of right now, you're right.
Well, I think they don't trust him to block. They said as much last year. He had 4 pass blocking snaps and gave up pressure on all 4 of them.
Yeah. And again, he would have to come around in that regard. And if the O-line is, in a solid spot that they like, maybe he could snag the number 2.
But he can't even catch. That's the thing. He can't catch, and he fumbles.
So when I say number 2 workhorse back, not the third down back.
Okay, so I'm talking about the third down back.
No. Number 2 workhorse back, where you have that guy underneath Brees. See, Brees is. I kind of look at it like this: if Brees was just thunder or just lightning, then you'd want your other guy to be the opposite. Brees is both.
Oh.
So Izzy could be that number 2 workhorse back, but you absolutely need a third down back. I don't know where they're going to get. There's guys out there still, but it's a mystery. It's a good call out. They definitely need a guy.
I mean, I had several guys who I wanted earlier in free agency, but they all signed. I liked Antonio Gibson from Washington. New England signed him. Michael and I had been on Patrick Taylor from Green Bay because he didn't really, he didn't play that much. But what he did kind of was like that, he could block reasonably well, could get you the yardage that you needed reasonably well. And so we kind of thought the Jets might go there. He signed. I forgot where he signed. A few other guys. I mean, Zeke Elliott is the one that's out there. But the problem is that when you look at Zeke gave up more pressures than any other running back in the NFL last year. Gave up the second highest pressure rate. He didn't, like, most of his catches were like on 3rd and long, where he didn't necessarily.
Was Mac Jones prone to holding on to the ball?
So that is a Mac Jones thing, and that's one thing you would have to look more deeply into.
No, I honestly don't know. Like, it's a genuine question.
I think Mac. Let's see how long Mac's average.
Because when you look at Zeke, he's always been a great blocker.
True.
But has he fallen off to that degree?
He also doesn't do a very good job of getting the yardage that you need from him. Like, he has this reputation of being a good short yardage guy, but he was below average at that last year, and below average at just getting the yardage that was schemed up for him. Let's see, Mac's time to throw was average time to throw was 2.42 seconds, which is pretty fast. Let me see his passing breakdown. Do they have the time in pocket? No, I would have to look that. It's too much. I have to look it up by the league, not just by him. But it looks like the Patriots may have schemed up a lot of quick stuff with him last year.
Yeah, that would make sense. Cam Akers still out there. Boston Scott.
So Akers is coming off, I think, an injury.
Yeah.
Boston Scott, maybe, some of these guys, you'd have to look into it. Look, Douglas likes to take running backs every year, so I imagine he'll take someone. Yeah, so McKinnon is the one guy I could get behind because I think like a year or two ago, he scored like 8 touchdowns or something.
CEH went back to KC, but they didn't bring McKinnon back.
Not yet. McKinnon's pretty old. I think he's like.
I know, but
31?
that's interesting to think about that they brought CEH back, but not McKinnon. I know he's 31, but still, like, he's entrenched.
For all you know, they will bring him back.
Yeah, they could.
All right, McKinnon is the guy I'd be interested in. Yeah.
Who?
Let's get final. No, I would be interested in McKinnon.
Yeah, McKinnon's kind of intriguing. Let's get a couple last questions in before I head out.
Okay, let's see if we have. Yeah, I also have to head out. Let's see if we have. Okay, so this is just someone saying, I've seen this a lot. Odunze's route tree is similar to Devontae Adams, and his contested catch ability is like D-Hop. I don't know where you're seeing the Devontae Adams thing from. Devontae is an expert release off the line. Odunze basically speed releases on every play.
It's tough to gauge college receivers with the release. It really is, because you can't replicate what you see at the NFL level. And compared to now, the way it used to be at the NFL level, it's, apples to oranges. It's so much easier these days compared to 20, 30 years ago. But even still, it's tough. It's tough to gauge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I hear that. I mean, the one thing I would say with that is just when you watch Garrett Wilson's tape, and I know people had questions about his route running, but as you said, you saw him make those moves. I know you were with Wayne the other day. You were looking at some of the college receivers. You see it with Ladd McConkey. You see it with A.D. Mitchell. You see it with some of these players, just that they know how to at least have some feel for setting up routes. You don't really see that with Odunze as much.
I agree.
So that's
the natural flow. I don't want to say shiftiness, but the natural flow and shiftiness, I guess, is not as clear with Odunze.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, look, again, I don't necessarily think he won't be good, but I just think that there's not necessarily, I don't necessarily think it's a slam dunk that he will be.
Yeah. The way I look at it, he's not as can't miss. The only 2 can't misses I see are Harrison and Neighbors.
And if the Jets had lost 2 games, they would be in position to take one of them.
Yeah, pretty much. And people are trying to shove Odunze in that group, but he's not, in my opinion.
Some people have him ranked as the number 1 above those 2.
Oh God, no.
Yeah. Okay, this is the last one.
I could be wrong. We'll see.
This is the last one. In my opinion, Warren can and will develop into a serviceable backup. He's not there yet. And all in season, the Jets must obtain a more viable backup, either a vet or a top pick. What did you think of Carter Warren? Carter Warren.
Oh, Carter Warren. You don't want to rely on him. That's obvious. I still look at him as a project. I mean, not an all-out project. I'm glad he got playing time. I mean, if there's any positives that came out of all the injuries, is that he did get in there and play. And Tippmann also, it was insane, and I understand it, but it was insane. Tippmann didn't start the year at center. But Carter Warren, he's got to be the fourth or even fifth. You want him to be the last O-lineman dressing, even inactive, if possible.
I mean, I'd be very happy if they got Bakhtiari and a rookie and put them both ahead of Warren. Warren was supposed to last year, and that's what he should be. Now, what? Yeah, I was just going to pull up one last thing. Ian dropped in the comments. So, hi, Ian. Yeah. Okay. I think that talking about in terms of backup running back, because Bilal was a good one.
Yeah, Bilal was one of those.
Somewhere, no?
Bilal's the perfect Jet trivia answer, like whatever the question is.
Yeah. Okay, I think that does it. Thanks so much for joining us, Robby. It was a lot of fun as always. Thank you so much, everyone who joined in the chat. Please like, share, and subscribe. Yeah. Okay. Please like, share, and subscribe. Subscribe to JetsXFactor.com. Again, best Jets content on the internet. Joe Blewett put up a few reviews that you can only see the full review if you're a paying member. So you can check it out. All his takes on Fuaga. I think he put up Odunze yesterday, Fuaga today. So go take a look at it. And thank you so much for joining. Take care.
Later, guys.
Okay. All the best. Bye.